All right, today we are jumping into one of the wildest, most whiplash-inducing stories in the entire book of Acts. Seriously, it's got miracles, a case of mistaken identity that goes way off the rails, and then shocking violence. And it all happens in pretty much a single day. So yeah, let's get right into it.
I mean, you've got to ask yourself, right? How on earth do you go from people wanting to worship you as a god to those same people stoning you and leaving you for dead? It is a story of absolute extremes, and it just blows the lid off how unpredictable and frankly dangerous it can be when you step into a totally new culture with a new message. So how did it all go so wrong so fast?
Well, it all kicks off with this incredible moment of divine power, a moment that sends total shockwaves through a city that was completely unprepared for what it was about to see.
Okay, so the setting for all this is a place called Lystra. Now, it was technically a Roman colony, but you gotta understand, culturally, it was very much a local pagan town. There wasn't a synagogue, which tells you Paul and Barnabas were on brand new turf. They were talking to an audience whose entire worldview was shaped by stories of gods and goddesses.
So, picture this. Paul's preaching, and he sees this one man in the crowd. A man who was born lame. I mean, he has never walked a day in his life. And Paul, he just perceives something. He sees that this guy has the faith to be healed. So in this booming voice, he just commands him, "Stand up on your feet." And bam! Instantly, the man is up. He's not just standing, he's leaping and walking around. It's public, it's undeniable, it's just wow, absolutely stunning.
The crowd, as you can imagine, is absolutely electrified. But the way they interpret this miracle, well, it goes in a direction the apostles never, ever intended, and it leads to a really dangerous misunderstanding. Seeing this unbelievable healing, the crowd just erupts. They're shouting in their own local language, and what they're shouting is that their gods have come down to visit them, disguised as humans. So their acceptance of the miracle is actually a complete misinterpretation of what's going on.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, right? It's how they process what they just saw. They immediately run it through the only filter they have, their local myths about the gods. So they look at Barnabas, who is probably a bigger, more imposing guy, and they go, "That's Zeus. The king of the gods is here." And then they look at Paul, who's been the one doing all the talking, the chief speaker, and they think, well, that's got to be Hermes, the messenger god. It makes perfect sense in their worldview.
And listen, this wasn't just some excited shouting in the crowd. This thing escalates, and it escalates fast, into a full-on pagan ceremony. The priest from the local temple of Zeus literally brings out bulls and wreaths to the city gates, getting ready to offer sacrifices to Paul and Barnabas.
This is the turning point. The moment Paul and Barnabas figure out what's happening, their reaction is immediate, it's forceful, and it's a huge lesson for all of us.
So their first instinct, their immediate reaction, is to tear their clothes. Now, for us that might seem a little dramatic, but you have to understand in their Jewish culture, this was a huge deal. It was a powerful public gesture. It was their way of screaming, no. It was the ultimate expression of absolute horror and grief, specifically in response to blasphemy against God.
They don't just stand there. They charge right into the middle of the crowd, shouting, "Men, why are you doing this? We're just human beings, just like you are." They have to shut this down, and they have to do it now. They immediately start to redirect all of that praise and worship. And the sermon they give, right there on the spot, is just a masterclass in how to talk to an audience that doesn't share your background. They don't quote scriptures these people have never heard of. No, they point to things everyone can see. They tell them to turn away from these useless idols and turn to the one living God, the one who made the sky, the earth, everything, the one whose goodness you see in the rain, in the crops, and in the joy of just having food to eat.
So they just barely managed to stop the sacrifices. But just when you think the chaos is over, the mood of this crowd swings, and it swings violently in the complete opposite direction.
This isn't random, though. This crazy shift is incited by outside agitators. Opponents who had been basically tailing Paul and Barnabas show up from the last couple of cities they preached in. These guys were determined to shut them down, and they start stirring up the crowd in Lystra, who are probably feeling pretty confused and embarrassed at this point.
And the speed of this turnaround is just terrifying. I mean, think about it. If you believe your gods can show up and be powerful but also get offended easily, it's not a huge mental leap to go from wanting to worship them to wanting to destroy them. The same hands that wanted to offer sacrifices now start picking up rocks.
And it is a brutal, brutal assault. The very same crowd that was calling Paul the messenger god Hermes
now stones him so viciously that they think he's dead. They drag his body out of the city and just leave him there.
This really looks like the tragic end of the line, right? A mission cut short by a violent mob. But what happens next? Well, it shows a kind of resilience that just defies all human logic.
From everyone's point of view in that crowd, it was over. The message was silenced. The opposition, for all intents and purposes, had won.
But he's not dead. As this little group of new believers gathers around what they think is his corpse, he gets up. He just stands up. And then, in what has to be one of the most incredible acts of pure defiance and faith you'll ever read, what does he do? He turns around and walks right back into the city. The same city that literally just tried to murder him.
So what do we take from this unbelievable story? Well, a few things for sure. 1, the absolute need to redirect praise away from ourselves and point it all to God. 2, we've got to persist even when the opposition is intense. 3, the power of community, of people who will gather around you when you're at your lowest. And finally, 4, a deep understanding that resilience is key and that even terrible setbacks can end up pushing the mission forward.
You know, this story really leaves us with a heavy question to think about in our own lives, doesn't it? We live in a world where public opinion is so incredibly volatile, where praise can turn to persecution in an instant. So what does it mean for us to be resilient, to stay grounded and persistent when we're not depending on the approval of the crowd? That's something to really chew on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.